RFK Racing, man, has not been the start that this team was hoping for. I mean, you look at Vegas, Keselowski was never really relevant, to be honest. He does finish this race 13th, but it really was nothing for him. I mean, had an average running position of 22nd, and it just was not great for that 6 car. We talked about Buescher dead last. This team has not been able to really showcase their strengths to start the year, man. I mean, they had speed at super speedways, but wasn't terribly impressive. RFK, this is a team that we expect them to control most of those races. Keselowski and Buescher, they always find each other, and they always find clean air up front. But I feel like all we talk about now with RFK, especially to start this year, is Brad Keselowski's winless streak. Now at 101 races, that conversation that only continues to get louder. So I know you had high expectations for this team. I mean, everybody did, to start the year. But what is your panic meter on RFK? Are you hitting a button right now? Are you giving some time? Do we still need to kind of see, what this team is going to do, or are you seriously concerned about the trajectory of where this team could potentially go this year?
Yeah. I mean, as we've mentioned 100 times, it is a small sample size, and you look at guys who are doing really well. You're like, okay, good start. Let's see how they go throughout the springtime and then the summer stretch. How that works out. And then you got guys who are really struggling, and you're like, is this a sign for what the whole season is, or is this just a little blip on the radar and they're gonna come back in no time? I think it's the latter with them. Though I am surprised that we didn't see the pace that I would expect in a Daytona 500 or an Atlanta Super Speedway race, or even a mile and a half. I know of all the track layouts, I would feel mile and a half is probably their weakest, but not that weak. Like I would feel like top 10s are still in the cards. And I know Buescher had that wild issue in turn 1 and 2. I think he stayed out, or he took 2 tires, and we saw him lead some laps up there, and he was just starting to kind of lose some positions. Then just that great slow motion shot. You just see the rim and the bolt just go flying out. And it caused a red flag, which is that kind of shows what damage it did that it must have done to the wall, because so many parts and pieces were missing. When it hit the wall, it must have ripped some of the metal off the safer barrier. And then he was done, and Brad, I thought he would kind of pick up the slack, so to speak, and he just never did. And he came out with a finish better than where he ran all day. A lot of guys, especially from the 4 camp, you look at Graxon, Blaney. Blaney was barely top 10, and he ended up third, I think, at the end. And Brad kind of did that, but just 10 or 12 markers back. And I didn't expect any slow start from those two. I thought they were really going to bust out, with a great 500, probably a 500 win. And then I expected the same with Atlanta. And then, once we get to the real season, just no issues, but it just hasn't quite been that way. And certain teams we see this, every year, teams just get off to a rough hand of races, and they're eventually able to kind of bring their people together and start busting out results, whether that's, summertime leading into the playoffs, or if it's earlier than that. I think it's going to be earlier than that. So to answer your question, I think the panic meter isn't quite turned on yet, but definitely has my attention a little, because I just didn't expect any poor results to start the year from them.
Just a number of mistakes for these drivers that cost them big time. And, we did have some drivers that were able to take advantage of some of that, but still, in the first real race of the year, when you have green flag pit stops and you got to execute, certainly be some rust for these teams, some growing pains, but it's certainly concerning seeing that we have just, all these guys, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, there were probably some more that were missing, but those were certainly the more worthy drivers who were in contention and had speed, brought it this weekend. So tough to see, but they're certainly going to have to clean it up.
In such a wide variety of issues too, like you mentioned, tire violations, Gibbs with the 54 team, we saw that in real time. They were showing his pit stop, and that tire rolls right off. We're like, get it. No, it's out of the box. And he was one of the rare ones to be able to come back. Just shows how quick of a car he had. Carson Hocevar as well. He was running around 10th to 15th, and he had a pit issue, and then he was able to come back to right where he was. But Kyle Busch's issue happened later in the race, and he just wasn't able to fight his way back through. It just wasn't enough time, and just an issue like that, just barely over the line. I think the team they chose not to play it safe. That they saw that it was close to the line, and they just assumed that it was okay because it literally was by inches. And I think situation like that, just back her up. Just back it up. Put the jack. The jack maybe wasn't even up yet. Just pull it back. We see him do it all the time, and I think going forward they're gonna play it safe, because what happens on the other end is your race is done. You're not just having a pit stop that's 3 seconds, 4 seconds slower. Now you're behind, half a lap because you're all the way at the back of the field on a restart. So you get situations like that are completely on you as a team, as a driver. And then you get, William Byron, where you run over the biggest trash bag I've ever seen. I didn't think that was a bag. I thought the peel, like the paint scheme, that's actually a wrap. Yes. I thought the wrap flew off because it was all black on the car. And
I'm with you there.
Yeah, that it's a bag.
I'm with you there.
Yeah. So and of course they had to make an unscheduled pit stop. You got to get that off right away. There's not a breath of air that's getting through that. 2 layers of thick black rubber. And I'm sure that hurt the engine a little bit. I mean, we heard about what the temperature got from the low 200s to like 350 around that. So it goes into a certain mode at a certain point. And if he was at 100%, I was surprised he didn't come back quicker than he did. We really didn't hear about him the rest of the day. You just salvaged the top 10 at the end, but early on it was him and Larson. I felt like that was the duo we were going to have to deal with all day. And once he had that problem, he lost all that time, and we just didn't see him again. So I don't know if the engine kind of went into a kind of a damage protection mode, and he wasn't able to bring 100%. But that was about it from him. And Christopher Bell as well. You mentioned his name. Had that tire issue really early. He spun on lap 158, I believe, and he crashed out in Atlanta. So he's earned 8 points the last 2 races since a great Daytona to start the year. So that's keeping him kind of in the middle conversation, but back-to-back races that he's going to want to forget. A lot of guys want to forget these last couple of weeks for sure.